Hi there, this is Nu-Trix. This is my new studio. The layout's not totally finished. Still have to think about where is the best place to put the camera or the other camera, the microphone. Most of it is logically located. I'll do another video about it if you want to be in all the details on what I went through to decide to put it like this. I'm going to do a video. It's going to be in the member only section, so you can go there and watch it if you're interested. Today, we're going to talk about a new soft synth from Cherry Audio. It's a recreation of a classic synthesizer, like they do most of the time. In this case, they're recreating the Pro Soloist from ARP. It's a synthesizer that came out in the early 70s, like 72. At the time, not a lot of analog synthesizer were with a lot of controls on it. Most of them were basically just preset you could switch, or you had a modular synthesizer. This is not a modular synthesizer. This is a organ top. You know, you would put it on top of an organ and you would be able to play with your one hand on the organ and have a solo on that synth. Very interesting in the type of controls it has. It has fewer controls that you see often on synthesizer. But what they did with Cherry Audio is that they went in and said, okay, let's recreate the original, and then let's open the box to sound designer who want to create their own stuff. So what you have is a recreation of the original, but then they did not limit themselves to that. They added effects, they added arpeggiator, they added a whole section of synthesis sound design with filters, ADSR, LFO. All of this was kind of part of the synth, but it was only like preset. You could switch it on. So now you have access to modifying it. And there's really cool stuff, like in the original, they used to have a 10 resonator, if I'm not mistaken, but these were fixed frequencies resonator. But today what they provide is actually 5 resonators, but they're fully modifiable. So you can change the frequency, you can change the amount of the resonator, you can move it, and you can even modify them with an LFO or any source of modulation. The mod matrix is pretty complete, so you can do a lot of advanced synthesis or normal synthesis in it. This synth was monophonic, but what they offer in the synth version, the soft synth version, also has polyphonic aftertouch. So and there's a lot of aftertouch control in there that is interesting to play with. Let's just dive in. I'll do a complete tour of all the controls of it. So it's a deep dive. And at the end, I have examples of how it sounds, the presets, and there's a little song. Actually, you heard it at the beginning. We're going to go through the different sounds to understand how they're made and what you can do with them. Let's just dive in. So when you look at it, it looks simple because you have only one window to work with, but actually it would have been like this. The original looks more like this. You have a panel at the top where you have the information to select the memory. So you go bassoon, buzz bassoon. So you would have all of these memory to, preset to load. And when you do change this, it changes the other window that we don't see right now. It's edit. When you click on panel edit, you see the panel to create the sound with all the synthesis. Well, if you change anything in here and then you go into performance and you switch one of these, it totally changed them to the value of the preset here. Okay? So quick tour before we deep dive. So this first panel is the performance panel, is the one that you supposedly see on the original. I never played the original Pro Soloist, so this is what you would see in the original one. Edit is the internal synthesis engine, a little bit more advanced than with the original add. ARP and effects, so you have an arpeggiator for the sound, and you actually for each of them, because you can, it goes further than the original. You can play two different sounds at the same time, so you can be in single mode, just one. You can be in double mode, so in layer, two can play at the same time, or it can be in split mode, so you can have upper and lower. That's why you see upper layer here, but we're in single, so we only have upper layer. And then you have these effects here, distortion, phaser, flanger, chorus, echo, and reverb. They all sound good. They're all part. I mean, if you played in any of the other soft synth from Stereo Audio, you know these. They're basically, they put them in all of them, and they sound really nice and musical. So I'm not going to dive into them, but I mean, you can have all of them activated on a layer, per layer, or global. You know, if you go global, it's going to be the whole synth going to have it, and layer is going to be two different set of effects running at the same time, if I'm understanding correctly. So this is how you work it. Now, if you're in split mode or double mode, I would say layer mode, but that's, let's say double mode, what you're going to have is a control upper. So right now I'm editing upper sound. If I click here or if I click here, I'm now seeing the panel for the lower sound. And when I play them, I hear the two of them. Say I'm going to add reverb on this one. So if you press solo, now I hear this one only. If I go upper and I press solo, I only hear the upper. If I take the solo out, I hear the two at the same time. So that's kind of the logic for, I would say, getting around how it works. What you have here is how you're going to have the keyboard control everything. You've got the volume, so this is the volume itself, the brilliance. Let's say, actually, let's go back to single. Brilliance is the filter, and it depends on where it is. Touch sensitive is how much the touch of the keyboard is going to affect something. This right now it's not affecting anything. And the bend range is when you're going to do pitch bend, how it's going to do it. It's not doing anything, because if we go back here to performance, now we see this. Okay, let's actually go see this. We have all of these sounds, and we have portamento. So you're gliding between the two of them. Portamento speed. Okay, that's speed. And this portamento is on or off here. Repeat is, it's going to repeat the envelope that you have in it. So let's take something, maybe a piano. Slow it down. So the speed of the repeat, it plays the whole ADSR envelope or AR envelope, and then when it's done, it repeats it. So, but then it doesn't play multiple keys, and it's just monophonic because it's in monophonic here. And monophonic, what's interesting is if you have, let's say, violin. If you want to have these controls here, touch sensor effects, and I've got aftertouch on this. Now, let's go back to really quickly what's aftertouch or polyphonic aftertouch. Polyphonic aftertouch is called in MIDI polyphonic key pressure. It means every key has a different separate pressure. It's not something you see in all synthesizer. It's actually quite rare. We don't see in a lot of synthesizer. Actually, in my kit, the only one that does it is the Micro Freak, which is kind of weird, but at the same time, the way this is designed, it's easier to make it this way. Whereas everything else I have aftertouch, like this one and that one, if I'm not mistaken, they have what they call channel pressure. So it's an aftertouch. So I mean, when you press on it, it's going to react to it, but it's going to affect the channel. So every note on that channel will have the same pressure. Meaning, if you're pressing 5 notes and you last one, the fifth one, you press more, the effect, let's say LFO coming in for vibrato, will affect all the keys at the same time. Whereas on this one, I could do it and every keys could have a different modulation. So maybe only the last one is going to be affected. So It means that what's interesting here is they have three options. If you have a real polyphonic synthesizer that sends polyphonic aftertouch, you can put it in poly, you can have separate controls, it works fine. If you don't, you put it in mono and you have the just one that's going to affect all the keys. But if you press the last, you're kind of cheating on it, but it gives you something really interesting. The aftertouch is going to affect only the last note. So you can play many notes and then you press, you might be in poly mode also, but the last one that you press is going to have the aftertouch, not the other ones. So you could play a solo and then you press more and the last one that you're holding has vibrato, for example, and all the other one don't have it. So it's interesting. It's a way to kind of fake a poly key pressure with only using a channel pressure, which is interesting, a cool way. So think about this if you need to. Let's go back to mono, and what we'll do, and we see that it's easy. You just, I want to have vibrato. Turn it on, you press. No, it's not fast enough. Tremolo, same logic. Wah. The volume. The brilliance. So you're controlling the filter. The growl. It's kind of a fast LFO coming in. A little bit like you would have on the trumpet. You would have that brrr that you could do. You have the wow. It's going to open the filters. It opens the filter and add very high resonance. And the bend is basically, if you go into the edit window, now you have the synthesis of it. You have the LFO, the modulator, you have the VCO, and then it goes into the filter or the frequency section. So there's two things. There's a resonator bank of 5 different resonator. Then it goes into a filter if you want to. And then it goes into a VCA. And then you've got 2 envelopes, ADSR and AR, so attack, decay, sustain, release, or attack and release. And they're both assignable to what you want. So the VCA can be controlled by ADSR, AR, LFO, velocity, all at the same time, or just one at a time. So it's really just what you decide to have. And then you've got a layer volume and a layer pan. So if you have 2 sounds, 2 layers sounding almost the same, but you want to pan them, you can have a very wide sound, or you can have just a little bit. So you can play with that a lot. At the end, you've got the modulation matrix. We'll go back to that after. So let's go back to VCO1. So VCO1, let's open the filter so we hear the full thing. So what we have here is a VCO that has only one oscillator, but it has 2 different shapes. You can have a sawtooth, a pulse, and you have a pulse width modulation here. You can actually change the pulse of it, and you can send, if you select the modulation matrix, you could send and control this so this changes. You also have an LFO pulse width here, so and you have a delay on the LFO here. It starts after. If I bring that to 0, and the shape of the LFO, normal stuff for this. Okay, bring that down to 0. You have LFO FM, so basically you can create a vibrato. You have a high pass. So right now, if I go back, let's say we want it to be lower in pitch. And what you have right now, you hear 2 things. You hear the sound of the square wave. You also have a saw wave. Let's turn this up for now. Okay. You have the saw, you have a super saw. This is pretty cool. Then it goes into the resonator bank. If you don't turn it on, it goes straight into the filter, and then what you have is this. What you're supposed to have when you have, let's say, this. Are we still in this thing here? Repeat. Oh, turn off the repeat. Okay, let's go back here. So the resonator bank, you have this in parallel to the signal that goes to the VCF. So right now, I have, let's say I bring these two volume to 0. So I've got, the only signal I have is not from the oscillator directory. It's the oscillator that goes into the resonator bank and the resonator bank that I hear after that. I could also decide to send them directly to the VCA. I can also send them to the VCF. And this is in parallel again. If I send it to the VCF, then I could say, well, and this is for each of them separately. So I can go here, no VCA, there's the VCF. This one directly to the VCA, the fifth one to the VCA, or maybe not. So this is this complex little beast that is the resonator bank, each of them being separate. Each of them, you can control the resonator frequency, the amount of it, the resonance that you have in it. There's preset you can load, and you can send them in parallel in the VCA-F or the VCA, and then you can still combine with the original sound that you had. If you go back here and say sustain. In the end, you can also add modulation to this. So you can say, well, I'm going to send LFO, and it's going to be assignable to, let's send it to the resonator 1 frequency, and this is going to be controlled via the ADSR. Or you could control the VCF cutoff, of course, which is already being controlled. You can assign it to everything. Even the attack, key, sustain, release value can change. So this is, I find this really interesting. You assign, let's say, an LFO to the release while you play with an arpeggiator, and it means that the sound will become very short and longer and short and longer. So these are like cool. Let's just try this. Let's just try this. Let's go back into arpeggiator, and we have the arpeggiator here. Okay, arpeggiator. Let's go back here. This is going to be assigned to I'm going to take the LFO and assign this directly to the release. That's it. Another cool synth from Cherry Audio. If you like what you're hearing, go check it out. There's a trial you can test, and well, that's it. You'll see if it runs right on your computer and if it's the sound that you want. Stay safe, make more music, and see you soon. Cheers.